All right. I believe this meeting is being recorded. Yep. Recording is running. So welcome to week whatever we're on now. And we've been using this same pattern. It's been working so far, so we will continue apace where I will read and everybody stop, make comments, adjustments, whatever as we go. I'll mark them into my handwritten notes on the draft on my lap, edit tomorrow, send out the edits, and then start working on section 8 for next week. So we'll do this, and then, like I said, if anybody wants to revisit any prior sections, we can. So here we go. And let me just say again, and I think I've said this in a couple of the other sections, I do not think this is a particularly good draft yet. There's a lot that is correct, but I think it's very repetitive, and I think it's maybe a little general. So really looking for some tightening up here. Okay, section 7, housing 7.1, general overview. The Partnership for Strong Communities, PSC, compiles housing data profiles for all Connecticut municipalities. The profile compiled for Thompson reinforces data cited elsewhere in this document, and it also includes breakouts for additional categories that are useful when considering how well Thompson's existing housing stock matches its future needs. For example, the PSC data shows that single-family housing in Thompson represents 81% of the residential properties in the town. That footnote, by the way, is that is a slight discrepancy to the data cited earlier, but the collection periods weren't exactly the same either. And those homes are 94% owner-occupied. An additional data point in the PSC profile shows that 64% of those homes have 3 or more bedrooms, and includes the observation that towns and cities that have larger homes with more bedrooms offer fewer housing options for younger workers or downsizing baby boomers. From 2011 to 2015, Thompson showed an increase in householders living alone since 2000, plus 4%. And households with someone aged 65 or older, an increase of 5% during that same period. I'm going to make a correction here. Conversely, the percentage of residents living with families and households with children under 18 both decreased during the survey period, a decrease of 4% and 9% respectively. The decline in households with Yep, go.
I was going to say, the data points you're utilizing, are those from the housing data profiles of 2018, or are they from the Thompson, Connecticut CERC town profile 2019, or other?
These are from the study, from the report that's linked here. I can't show a side-by-side.
I get it. Okay. I get it.
And I believe that the data was released in 2018 and collected in that period through 2015 off the top of my head.
I just want to know, because I was looking through this myself, and I just wanted to make sure I was using the same data set. I was somewhat concerned that it looks like it's the 2018 data that you're using, 2018 housing data profiles. And in as much as we're stating it's 2020 or something, I just wonder if we put a different footnote, or I guess you're linking your URL link there, your live link within the text would do it as well. But I just want to make sure I'm on the same page.
Here's the footnote for that particular piece. This is slightly higher than that. So this figure, the 77.9, is 2013 to 2017. This PSC data was 2011 to 2015.
Right. Thank you. Okay. Press on. Okay.
So where was I? From 2011 to 2015, Thompson showed an increase in householders living alone since 2000. Oh, we got to it. The decline in households with children under 18, in fact, was nearly double the pace of the increase of households with adults 65 plus. The latter cohort, according to PSC data, is further projected to increase by 24% between 2020 and 2030. All of these data illustrate a mismatch between the existing housing stock in Thompson and the likely needs of future residents. In the PSC closing analysis of Thompson's housing conditions, the following points stand out. 44% of the renters and 21% of homeowners spend 30% or more of their income on housing. Footnote here is that therefore meets the criteria of cost burdened. The projected increase of 24% by 2030 of population age 65 plus potentially leads to the need for smaller, denser, more affordable homes closer to the town center, services, and if possible, transit connections. And 44% of single-family homes in Thompson were built after 1970. Because of the needs of the baby boom generation at that time, these homes tend to be larger and have more bedrooms than homes built prior to 1970. 64% of homes in Thompson have 3 or more bedrooms. Larger homes are generally more expensive to purchase and more costly to maintain. This makes them impractical choices for many aging residents and often places them out of reach for first-time home buyers. There have been several notable successes where towns have made the effort to encourage development that promotes density and affordability with a mix of residential, service, and retail uses in walkable districts. The Montgomery Mills and Windsor Locks is a prime example of thoughtful, high-density redevelopment incorporating affordable housing units. And these jumps, this goes to the general info page for Montgomery Mills, and this one goes to how they determine their affordable housing levels. The designated affordable units are incorporated seamlessly into the overall complex, indistinguishable from their market rate neighbors, thus putting the lie to the frequent objection that affordable housing degrades neighborhood quality. Well-designed, affordable rental housing or deed-restricted condominiums with built-in or nearby services and amenities serve certain demographics particularly well. Young professionals in the early stages of their careers who may have to maintain flexibility to follow employment opportunities. More established single professionals or professional couples without children for whom the maintenance of a single-family home and yard holds less appeal than having maintenance needs addressed by a property manager. And seniors aging out of their larger homes in Thompson wishing to downsize while remaining in the community. The 2020 overhaul of the Thompson zoning regulations has been referenced throughout this document as a step forward in encouraging greater flexibility throughout the town. One hoped-for consequence is that the sharp reduction in minimum lot sizes for areas served by public water and sewer utilities will enable more development of what has been referred to as missing middle housing. That's a jump to a wiki in those districts. These more diverse and often compact housing styles, examples being bungalow courts, duplexes, row houses, and triplexes, while once normative in neighborhoods across the country, became more difficult to build in many communities after the adoption of zoning in the post-war era, leading to the rise of unsustainable suburban development patterns. More on the topic of missing middle housing will be explored in Section 7.3, Appropriate Housing Density. All right, anybody have anything on 7.1?
I do. I have 2 topics, very quick ones.
Hit me.
The one topic is we're a classic bedroom community in every sense of the word because of the lack of work inside our town. And I don't take that as a negative. Some people take it as a negative. I don't. But I think that it conveys a lot of information in a short line that talking about us being a bedroom community. The second topic is I've been to probably 80 to 90 different restored mill complexes in the southern part of New England for obvious reasons, and we can talk to CME and other companies about that work that I did for them. But the bottom line is the best one that's closest to what we've got that I've ever seen is the soap factory in Glastonbury, where it's got the large lake behind it. It's got the mixed living community where you have the younger generation also living in with some of the older folks too. So I just mentioned those 2 things would be suggestions.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. You know, I included that Montgomery Mills because it was one I was personally familiar with. I toured the facility right before they opened, and I am aware of their affordable housing policy, which I wanted to emphasize. But I will look at that soap factory one as well.
Yep.
Anybody got anything else here?
I was thinking that we need to point out the fact that the resources are available at the Riverside Mill project that is out there, but I guess you're going to talk about that in the next section, right?
A little bit.
In other words, it's not as bleak. It's basically in the works and it's on the horizon. So it's not like it certainly at this point doesn't exist. That doesn't mean it's not a viable, future alternative, but that's a function of a lot of things. But that's what I was going to say.
Yeah, it's probably worth pointing out. It's probably worth exploring actually in this overview.
Yeah, exactly.
The next one on affordable housing, it doesn't really apply to. He's not putting in any affordable units, which
I was going to put the hook up in the front.
Continues to cheese me off, but
well, I would just put what I'm getting at is, let's sell this deal. Maybe I'm the wrong person, but you got to say, hey, you know what? We've got this great opportunity out there for new commuter or bedroom community in the form of the mill, as well as what there's a new deal down there in Putnam that recently opened, or starting to ramp up, I guess. So maybe somewhere we emphasize or highlight the fact that it's in the works or on the soon to be implemented. That was what I was thinking.
Yeah, it's a good point. So so it makes sense to me to illustrate some of the existing projects and then point out, hey, and we've got this one coming, which will be a piece of the housing inventory in addition to these facts which are on the ground.
But that's how many units, how many keys was it? I mean, I'm trying to remember how many keys, 300, 400 keys in that mill? 300?
300 plus is what we say. So, I want to say it's like 330. Oh, it's huge.
It's a big project. I've got several projects I'm working on right now that we own and operate, and there are 200 keys, and it doesn't have all the character we have now. Obviously, there's a big jump between a building today and where it's going to be. However, you've got also maybe an opportunity to reiterate the proximity that Thompson has as the nexus to New England. You're 30 minutes from Worcester, you're 24 miles from Providence, you're 45 minutes to Hartford, and you're, I don't know, an hour to Boston, hour and a quarter to Boston, depending on where you go. Or better, more importantly, from the 128 or 495 corridor. Now, that's a lot to say, but somehow there's got to be you want to get their attention in the first paragraph, otherwise you lose them. Many times I write stuff up and I sum up these great analysis and I put at the end, I said, you know what, I'm moving that one up to the front of the paragraph because I'll never lose them. They'll never read the data if there's nothing in it, right? It doesn't look good. They aren't going to, it's like a cupcake. If it doesn't look good, you're not going to taste it.
Don't need too much frosting though.
Well, there's moderation in all parts of life. But anyway, that was just a general. I mean, I think it's got the data, but we have tons of data. How about making it? It goes back to what I commented the last time we had a chat. It's like, sell the sizzle, not the steak. The sizzle is what the aroma and the image of it's what sells. The raw meat and everything. That's important, and you can't have the sizzle without the raw meat. But nobody wants to hear about the raw meat. They want to hear about the sizzle. Anyway.
Cindy, you had something, I think?
Yes, you had referred to the Putnam mill there. And I know that the Riverside mill here has 300 units, but the Putnam mill has 80 units and there's only 8 left to rent. Yeah, so they've really, so the reason why I bring that up is because to encourage the developer of Riverside is that how fast those units went in the town of Putnam.
How long has it been listed? Was it only about a month?
Do you have a sense of how quickly those went? Actually, maybe Joanne could answer that question. Do you know how fast those units went, Joe?
Less than 2 months. I mean, they're not listed with a realtor. They're listed by a private individual, and they lasted. I think that they became available maybe 2 months ago, if that. So they went like hot potatoes for sure.
Sounds like
so they've got like 90% occupancy. Yeah.
Sounds like they underpriced the product. Which
no, they're not cheap.
The rents are high. They're higher than what I normally deal with in apartment rentals. I mean, I don't know for sure, but they're probably $1,400 to $1,600.
Yeah, about that. I think it started like studio at $1,200 and went up to $1,600. I remember reading it someplace recently on the prices. So
good. All right. So I'd maybe put something. I don't know how you put it in there, but put that hook up there, right? Saying, hey, look, we have a great deal. It's coming on market. It's coming to market within the next 36 months or something.
Right. I wish it was 36 months, but that's a story for another day.
Yeah.
All right, let's continue scrolling. Anybody else have anything else on that section that should be added, deleted, changed, emphasized, de-emphasized?
I just had one small comment, but you're so good in the way you put your words together. I kind of got stumbled on let's see, it's the top of the second page, so I'm not sure where it says incorporated seamlessly. I'm looking at what yours. I'm looking.
The designated affordable units are incorporated seamlessly into the overall complex.
Yeah, indistinguishable from their market rate neighbors, thus putting the lie to the frequent objection. I didn't know what that meant. I mean, I wasn't.
Well, if it's not clear, I'll edit it, change it. I mean, you know, what I'm trying to point out is I get calls, not every day, but fairly regularly, about people who are asking questions about the Riverside Mill, complaining that it's going to have affordable housing in it or low-income housing in it, which A, is untrue, but B, is expressing biases that are themselves untrue. That, you know, if we have affordable housing, the town's going to go to crap, blah, blah. You know, I have this conversation with some regularity.
Oh, yeah. I just, maybe I didn't like the word the lie. It was just
okay.
a different word or
complex adjective that maybe we want to different word is what I think you're saying, right?
So,
yeah, rephrase. Yeah, I can rephrase.
Because I knew exactly what you meant, but I just thought that maybe it could be rephrased a tiny bit. That's it.
The assumption that is frequently proposed that or something. I don't know, some simple.
Yeah. I can rephrase. That I can do. I'm the exact opposite of George. I always want to point out all the warts.
Well, it's important to do it. I mean, warts are good. Put them in the end. give me a commitment. You know, we're dating here. We want to you'll put your best foot forward. We'll tell you the bad stuff later. I want you to fall in love.
Obviously,
then we'll
obviously
give you
George has never dated me.
Absolutely the truth. I never have. All right, moving on. Sorry about that.
No problem. 7.2, affordable housing. And here, by the way, is where where I feel it starts to get repetitive again and too generalized. So Cindy and Joanne in particular, I'll take whatever you got for me. And there's some stuff in the second paragraph that's not 100% accurate that I already know I have to change, but I'll read as is. Another key statistic cited in the PSC report is the percentage of recognized affordable housing units in Thompson, currently tallied at 5.9% of all residential units. The state of Connecticut does not mandate that municipalities maintain the level of affordable housing units at 10%. However, being below that threshold leaves municipalities at a disadvantage in the affordable housing land use appeal procedure, where the burden of proof is placed on the town when denying proposed affordable housing developments. This, in effect, gives developers of such proposed housing projects wide latitude to disregard local zoning regulations, reducing the extent to which Thompson's Planning and Zoning Commission could set conditions on any such proposals. And this is the stuff that's not 100% accurate, in that all of our designated affordable housing units aren't here. What they are is they're the only ones managed by the Housing Authority. Found in a single age-restricted development, Pineview Courts, also known locally as Gladys Green, accepts seniors aged 62 plus and adults with disabilities aged 18 plus in 70 total one-bedroom units. They are not subsidized, but rentals are income restricted. Historically, public attitudes in Thompson have not been friendly toward the development of affordable rental housing. Biases against low-income individuals have influenced prior discussions with developers presenting applications for multifamily housing in the past. The proposed redevelopment of the 929 Riverside Mill into 300-plus market-rate apartments, widely seen as a desirable revitalization project, may have softened some resistance to the idea of additional rental housing for Thompson. But recent comments received during the public engagement exercises and during the open comment period on the rewrite of the zoning regulations indicate that there is work to do to clear the stigma associated with affordable housing in the minds of many residents. Frequently cited concerns are those of potentially reduced property values or urban levels of density disrupting the overall character of the community. These concerns, however, are rarely borne out by the facts, as shown in this research report, which this jumps to, by real estate website Trulia.com. In the overwhelming majority of cases, adjacent low-income housing development has no discernible impact on property values in high-cost districts. Denver, Colorado showed a slight uptick in property values. Only the Boston-Cambridge metro area showed any statistically significant downward pressure on property values. In examining the latter example, the report notes, given that these two markets are geographically adjacent to one another, this effect might be attributed to region-specific market effects that reflect where low-income housing projects were placed. Concentrating subsidized housing projects in particular areas such as Roxbury and Dorchester in Boston, or Cambridgeport and Cambridge in a short time period, for example, might have the effect of crowding out other development activity. In other words, the report's author suggests that it is the concentration of subsidized housing developments that drives down the adjacent property values. There have been many studies which demonstrate that economic segregation through clustered low-income development has continuing deleterious effects throughout residents' lives. In the report Invisible Walls, Connecticut's Separate and Unequal Housing, the state of Connecticut is specifically called out for driving the construction of subsidized housing for low-income families to already challenged districts. The quote, since the mid-1980s, almost $2.2 billion in low-income housing tax credits have been awarded to construct 27,000 affordable housing units in the state. Just 10% were built in prosperous towns, an investigation by the Connecticut Mirror and ProPublica has found. About 80% were located in struggling communities, literally erecting pockets of poverty. The rest fall somewhere in between. The rest, this is my side note, being 10% of the rest of all of it, so communities that are just middle of the road. While many state leaders across the country direct those credits to poor areas, arguing that's where the need is greatest, Connecticut stands out on the national stage. In a recent federal study of 21 states, it had the second highest concentration of affordable housing in high poverty neighborhoods, behind only Mississippi. The statutes controlling the adoption of the town's PoCD stipulate that the town must consider its housing needs, including the need for affordable housing. Further, the data shown on the PSC report regarding demographic shifts and percentages of cost-burdened households make it clear that there is a specific need to promote a pattern of development that incorporates homes with smaller footprints in denser neighborhoods that concentrate public services more efficiently. Given the observations regarding the ill effects of concentrating low-income developments, the statutory requirements, and the demonstrated needs of Thompson's changing population, we recommend the development of an affordable housing plan that promotes mixed-income housing throughout districts served by public water and sewer utilities. In 2020, Thompson's Office of Planning and Development was awarded an assistance grant by the Connecticut Department of Housing to develop an affordable housing plan using the updated DOH guidelines. In development of that plan, strategies will be articulated to promote development of multifamily housing that includes market rate units in conjunction with set-asides for affordability scaled to median income within the Downtown Mill Rehabilitation District, Thompson Corridor Development District, and Common Residential District. Okay, what do we got? Take it apart.
I didn't mind it.
Speaking as an old guy,
Yeah.
the only thing I don't want to do is mow my lawn anymore. So just the reason for me is to get out of a big house is I want to have services provided to me that I have no interest doing anymore for myself. And I just don't think that sense needs to, there are a number of people, and I know many, many people around here who feel the same way.
Hear, hear.
George, you on board there?
You bet, man. That's why I planted a woodland garden in my front lawn.
I've had it with the maintenance, the tree limbs. Just someone else take this over, please.
That's the way a lot of people think, Joe. So, I mean, how do we, do you want to project that in this report, or?
I think, yes, I think it needs to be stated that we're talking about affordable housing, but there's affordable housing and there's a need for affordable housing with services. And I don't know how you say that, but I can tell you, your brothers-in-law up in Boston, that's the first thing they look for. They didn't look for the building, they didn't look for the room. They said, where can I get alt services done for me?
Well, that's what you call senior housing.
Yes.
Condos.
Well,
You can do with condos.
it's not just what you call senior housing, which is another point, and I didn't really get to it, partly because I just ran out of time before I could go back. But there is another sort of train of thought, and it's not as well fleshed out, I think, as the studies that support mixed income housing, but that senior limited developments are actually not necessarily the most beneficial to seniors in many cases, because it's isolating in similar ways to the way if you pack all the poor people in one development, the participation in daily life is skewed in one way. So services is the key, but it isn't necessarily services specific to seniors. I think that's more related, Joe, to what we get into with density, because density isn't just numbers of people, of course, it's proximity to services that you're referring to.
Okay.
But, maybe it belongs here somewhere as well in terms of access to services. There's also the difference between capital A affordable housing and just housing that happens to be affordable for people. They are not always necessarily the same thing.
That's right.
Not that the state cares when they're doing their assessments. I mean, I can't quite figure out where this 5.9% of the affordable housing is. I know that 70 units at Pineview Courts is not 5.9%. Now, there are obviously some Section 8 landlords in town. I have less ability, they're less visible to me.
Well, I wondered where that 5.9 came from, or how they were able to figure that out as well, because we don't have any specific neighborhoods. Like in Putnam, for instance, they have the, quote, the projects, unquote. I mean, it's been called the projects since the late 60s. So that's a low-income development, whereas Thompson, well, I mean, if you want to consider the Three Rows area, maybe are they considering that the 5.9?
Yes. That's
well, if they, yeah, I'm assuming because I just ran up into Paul's office to ask if there was a way that the assessor could tell me, and he can't either. But just from the logic of it, in order to take Section 8 as a landlord, you have to register for it. So, and you have to fill out whatever the required paperwork is. So there must be and they can be anywhere. Any landlord, anywhere, regardless of how a property is zoned, can apply to be a Section 8 landlord. So I'm guessing there's quite a bit more of it than I would have expected up Route 12. These rental units in the old brick houses may take it. I know Three Rows does take some. It's not exclusively.
No.
So ironically enough, it's kind of good that we don't know who those...
Where the bad neighborhoods are.
Wow.
Right, because when you concentrate them, you make a bad neighborhood, right? So if you don't know the economic circumstance of your neighbor, you're less likely to make assumptions about that person's character. It doesn't mean that they are good, bad, whatever. Economic circumstance is its own discrete thing. But when you group particularly very low income developments together, because often people who struggle financially also lack sort of social and political capital, they're more vulnerable to being taken advantage of by landlords, and then you do end up getting those sort of cascading negative effects of concentrated poverty. So in one sense, it's good that I don't know where they are, but for the purposes of this exercise, I'd like to know where they are.
You're talking about section 8, right, Kira?
Well, specifically, yeah, because I don't know where else we have affordable units other than the housing authority units and this mysterious number that's making up the 5.9%.
So is that those figures available from the federal government on the Section 8 department? Could you?
They may be.
Consult with them?
Right on your road or right on my road. There could be an apartment right, down the street from me that the landlord accepts Section 8. But you would never know it by looking at the house. It's not that it's in poor condition. It's just that it has its restrictions, and the state has come in and reviewed the property, and it passes inspection, so the landlord can get approval and get a Section 8 tenant. It has nothing to do with the exterior appearance.
Right.
Or neighborhood.
So that's something you could research, right? To see if
I suppose, yeah, theoretically. I mean, it's not like I want to out particular landlords or developments. I just kind of want to know for my own purposes where they are.
No, I'm just looking at the percentage. I'm not looking at names or just
so if you look at
Right.
3 rows, the entity that owns many of these properties is called North Grosvenor Restoration LP, which is a limited partnership. Do we know is that something that we know about? Do we know who? I mean, the majority of those properties, although some are owned by individuals, I'm looking at the Thompson map geo, which gives me a cross-reference to the tax parcel. Some are owned by individuals, but the majority of them are owned by this limited partnership. Do we know who that might be? And also Agate Properties LLC. So these are owned by corporate entities in 3 rows.
Those
Many
are
are owned.
years ago when it was fixed over and all the money was available to fix them over.
Yeah, so I wonder what those are.
I have not seen one of those apartment houses come up on the market for sale for a very long time.
What's a plus? That's a good thing. Maybe that means that it's
Exactly.
stable and.
So since I'm not a resident of Thompson, I've always been kind of confused about that 3-row area down there. Is that run by a private company, or is that a part of the government, or how is that?
No, it's a private landlord. That's what George was just looking at.
Okay.
But there are a couple of them, for whatever reason, that were carved out from the original owners or the interim owners after they were no longer mill buildings, I think, retained a couple and sold off a couple separately. But the bulk of them were sold to one management company or another. Whether it's the same one that owns them now, I couldn't tell you. But
all right, so when you drive down there, you see, the front of it. It says the office. Who is that? That's the management company.
Yeah.
it would have to be.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm sort of asking because a sideline because I had a complaint down there and had no idea who to. Okay. So I don't
We're
know.
multi-purpose here.
18 of 30, I counted them just now. 18 of 30 are listed as owned by North Grosvenor Restoration LP, and their address is a PO box. So, I mean, that's a Secretary of State research project. But bottom line is, I mean, what category does that fall into, right? So, I keep thinking that being of possibly affordable housing, whether depending on your criteria. Then of course there's what are those other properties called? The ones that are all owned by right behind LB's there.
Is that the one they called Greek Village, Joe?
Yeah.
Greek Village, yeah.
Yeah.
So 3 of those properties are owned by one person.
I think so.
According to tax records, well, 2 of them. Anyway, it's a trust and an individual on 2, and then there's another individual that owns those multifamily properties. But my expectation is that those between the 3 rows, the Greek reference, and others would meet the general criteria of affordable housing. And then you've got the Gladys Green, Pineview Courts.
Pineview Courts.
Yeah, which is a town. It's a Section 8 property, right?
No.
No, that is income restricted, unsubsidized.
Yeah,
so you have to be receiving Social Security or disability
right.
to live there.
Restrictive, right? Other than the disability, it's age restrictive.
Correct, 62 plus.
Yeah. So that's not low affordable housing. That's just elderly housing, as what I.
No, it is counted as, that is definitely counted in our affordable housing inventory because it's income restricted.
And what about all the properties along the?
In other words, if I sold my $2 million mansion because I wanted to downsize into few courts, I couldn't do it.
No, you couldn't, because it is based on your income. You're right.
Yeah.
And I'm sure, I don't know if they count your assets too. So if you did sell even a $200,000 house, I don't know that you could live there.
Yeah, I suspect you're probably right.
So what about all the single families along Route Riverside Drive, which are all multifamilies? Below Dunkin' Donuts.
Is this the section to ask that about?
Oh, the brick houses by Dunkin' General Store?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's a general discussion of the inventory of affordable housing. So in terms of identifying it, you know, the areas, without being, you know, too specific, yes, we could do that. Of course, I'm trying to make almost the exact opposite point, which is you
can't find
affordability. Them. Right. You don't want to encourage stigma by saying, oh, these are the areas you got to watch out for. This is the low-income housing. The point is that it should be indistinguishable neighbor to neighbor. I mean, any neighbor could be a good neighbor or a bad neighbor, no matter their income level. And this is a conversation Cindy and I have had about certain people we know and their biases against renters in general. You know, there's nothing about being a renter that makes you a bad householder. And there are plenty of people who own properties who are terrible neighbors. So, you know, the part of, to me at least, part of this section on affordable housing, other than to generally state that we need more, but because we are below that 10% threshold, even if it's not a mandate, we remain at a disadvantage as long as we're under that threshold. Yep. But also the stigmas are foolish and counterproductive.
Sure. Well, my question, my thought was that there's a lot of affordable housing in town. It's just not properly categorized, which goes to the original question. And I'm looking at these sections that are multifamily. I know we all know they're multifamily. While we're speaking, I've been hitting the text database saying who owns them, and they're all owned by individuals for the vast majority of those multifamily units. So it's not like there's one corporation that owns them, or there's one integrated or one comprehensive management company that handles them. So I guess it goes back to the question: what constitutes their 5% cutoff, and is it undercounting our housing stock? Which, if you look up and down Main Street, if you look up and down Riverside Drive, if you go and look at the 3 rows and the other properties, I think you probably have statistically a 10% or closer to more than 5% number. That's all.
I'm making a marginal note here to just confirm how that's calculated. I know how it's calculated in some cases, but I don't know how it's calculated in all cases.
Yeah, it's a technical housing or planning question, I guess. We have plenty of affordable housing around.
I accidentally removed myself from the meeting. What were you talking about, George? What are you making notes on? I'm sorry.
What I was suggesting is that the affordable housing of 5.9% may be underrepresented, and I call to that. How did they come up with that number? So that's part of it. And as we were chatting, I was just looking at different places where we have multifamily properties, which are most likely affordable, and I'm wondering if those are being included. So maybe we need to know the composition of their 5.9. Once we know
I thought that
5.9
was low too, myself.
Yeah, I mean,
just from what I know of Thompson and being involved in it so deeply in the last 3 years, so I thought that was low.
Well, I think that's the difference between capital A affordable and lowercase a affordable. Some things get designated and some things get not designated.
Okay. I see.
And it only sort of has to do with whether or not it is affordable for people to move in there. So that's a question. That's why I made that marginal note. So I'll get some more clarity there. Let's move on to this.
Just one more
Yep.
thing, and I don't know if this is the place, but it's a concern that some of the houses on Route 12 Riverside Drive, is there some type of program that this project can suggest, as an incentive program for upgrading some of those buildings on Route 12? And again,
The programs certainly exist. Sometimes you can apply for CDBG small cities money, which I did not do this year because I was going to try to take care of community fire, which never materialized. It is also possible to create something called, or at least it used to be, called a neighborhood revitalization zone. I think you can still do that. And there's also, I think the thing that no longer exists was an incentive housing zone, but I think that might have been replaced by that rehabilitation district that we just adopted, which does specifically incentivize either building or rehabbing multifamily properties for some kind of tax assessment break. I think it's
so
a
is this the
freeze.
place where you would put that, or in the plan?
Maybe.
Okay.
I mean, I'm making another note here to talk about incentives for homeowner rehabilitation.
I mean, and I'll, because we're a small group here, and I know this is be recording, but if there just could be some strong incentive to rehab those houses to make that strip more attractive when people are driving into the town, it would be such a plus for the town of Thompson and North Groenendale.
Yeah, it's a good point, Cindy, and I didn't include anything like that in any of this, but it probably should be somewhere, either under affordability or maybe under the action plan, which
right.
I did not draw up. So I have that here in my notes. All right, let's read this. I don't know what this thing is asking me to move this window away. 7.3, housing density. In the 2010 edition of the PoCD, it was projected that Thompson's population would increase from 9,468 to 25,000 residents over the following decade, a potential increase. Yeah, there's no joke. That's what they had in the prior edition. A potential increase of 264%. It was feared that such a level of growth would strain ability of the town to keep up with public services and stretch the resources of the public schools beyond their capacity. In 2020, the population of Thompson was 9,602, representing less than 2% growth over the decade. Further, as shown in the Partnership for Strong Communities data, the percentage of families and households with children decreased at rates greater than the population growth over that period, -4%, -9% respectively. It would seem, therefore, that anxiety over uncontrolled growth has been unwarranted. This document has advanced arguments for increasing allowable density based on the need to increase revenues for public services without raising the taxation burden for individual households. Increased density has been a contentious topic with legitimate concerns about preservation of landscape and community character being offered as arguments against such increases. Those who oppose a general increase in density posit that Thompson will be transformed from a pastoral setting to a crowded urban environment. Ironically, the forces that are most corrosive to the rural character of Thompson are those of increased suburbanization and sprawl. It is sprawl that gobbles up farmland and open space, cutting up wildlife corridors in favor of added subdivisions and roads. Conversely, dense, compact, walkable neighborhoods amortize public services more effectively than outlying districts. The question must then be posed, what is the ideal level of density to boost fiscal health without degrading the qualities that are so important to residents? This document has posited a potential increase of average density to 104 parcels per road mile, with the stipulation that no new public roads should be constructed within the town. In 2020, residential density is at roughly 19 parcels per road mile. The potential for density in the rural residential agricultural district is 70 parcels per road mile, and the potential in the districts served by public utility is 211 parcels per road mile. Even without further adjustments to the frontage requirements in the rural residential agricultural district, and with no new roads constructed, Thompson has the capacity to absorb much higher density than currently exists. In section 7.1, the topic of missing middle housing was raised. These small, often multi-unit residences exist easily alongside single-family homes in the traditional neighborhoods that were the norm prior to the adoption of zoning and the resulting shift toward an automobile-based society. Recent revisions to the zoning regulations will make the infill of certain types of missing middle homes easier to achieve. In all districts, two-family dwellings and accessory dwelling units, including conversion of existing structures to these uses, can now be built with only a simple zoning permit. Conversion of existing buildings to multifamily units is permitted with a site plan review by the Commission in all but 2 districts. And I point out that the Thompson Column Village and the Lake District are exceptions. In districts served by public water and sewer utilities, lot size minimums were reduced to 4,500 square feet. In combination, these measures enable the construction or conversion of smaller, more affordable single-family units and small income-generating properties. This brings real estate development more within reach to local residents as a way to build individual wealth and in potentially expanding the inventory of taxable units to build community wealth as well. Further measures in the districts with public utilities have loosened the permit requirements for several small business uses with the hope that more 15-minute neighborhood enterprises will arise. Having daily needs within an easy 15-minute walk for residents will drive the desirability of those neighborhoods for prospective homeowners, renters, and businesses. Driving density downtown in this way may ease some pressure on the outlying neighborhoods to build out to full capacity, delaying the need to further reduce frontage requirements in the rural residential agricultural district. Some have speculated in the unfolding of the COVID-19 pandemic that density creates health risk and that therefore an increase in density may be undesirable on those terms. As seen in this report and all these blue or hyperlinks, in this report published on the website cityjournal.com, a study conducted by the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health concluded that density was not a driving factor for fatalities. There was some evidence cited in additional studies that crowding, however, was a factor. To understand the difference, it may be helpful to think of the future apartments plan for the River Mill, with 300 plus units filling 750,000 square feet. The housing is certainly dense. However, if the households in those units are made up of 1 to 3 individuals each, they are not crowded. Crowding is often a consequence of poor affordability. For example, when large families squeeze themselves into small apartments. And in neighborhoods of concentrated poverty, crowding adds to factors that contribute to poor health outcomes. Density, therefore, retains its desirable qualities in terms of economic productivity. More retail and service options are likely to develop in a denser setting, and community vibrancy. Closer contact with neighbors, eyes on the street, more housing options. That is as far as I got. And I think that there's more to say in general about housing, but let's start with what we've got.
You've got a double OF, so let's fix that further on down.
Where?
Near the bottom.
Where am I?
Near the bottom, there's a double of. Where it says 1 to 3 individuals each.
I see it. I got you. Of. Scratch. I know you guys have thoughts.
Well, there's not much else to say.
No, there isn't.
You said everything. We don't have anything else to offer. We don't have, a senior living or senior apartments or small homes for people to downsize. We can't offer that. We just don't have them. I've been saying for years, I wish a developer could do that, but nobody's come forward to do that. So we have a shortage of that in town.
What about house lots? Do you have a big feeling for vacant? There are a number of subdivisions out there that are platted but not constructed. Do we have a feeling for what that inventory is?
Certainly not off the top of my head. Cindy might have a slightly better feeling for it because she looks at them more often.
I don't know any subdivisions out there that haven't been developed except maybe the one in back of the Milltown Grill.
That was one that's one. Yeah. And there's some of that being developed, right? We've got some in the west side. It seems like we've got a lot of we've got a lot of 37 square miles and only 9,300 people at like 250 per square mile. It seems like we've got a lot of land that's available. Maybe it's not readily developed. I mean, I think a lot of folks have to buy the property and build their own home, which doesn't make it easy for affordable.
There's no
Right. So one of the objections, and this is what I'm trying to dance around a little bit for the urban phobic, is that the hand wringing about the rural character and we don't want more people, we don't want more of this, we don't want more of that. A lot of that is anxiety about cutting up the landscape. So that's your sprawl, right? That's your moving away from your compact city center where public services amortize well, where you could have the 15-minute neighborhoods, yada, yada, yada. Now, we did make it easier to build smaller units out there in that zoning regs rewrite. We reduced the minimum lot size in the private water and sewer areas all to 1 acre. There is a flip side of that, which is we have to adjust the subdivision regulations to make it much harder to build new roads so that we're not cutting into back land, right? Because there's a lot of anxiety about loss of farmland, open space, wildlife corridors, and I share some of that. The overall reaction has been, we don't want any more people, we don't want any more this, we don't want any more that. Whereas by really cutting all those things down, and that's what we refer to here in this paragraph here, some of the changes in terms of 4,500 square foot lot minimums, which for anybody who's wondering, that was retrofitted to the smallest existing house lot in what up until recently was called R20. Is 1/10 of an acre. There's a house on it. There's a house next to it that's got a little more of 1/10 of an acre. I just walked that neighborhood last weekend, putting door hangers on for Larry Grow. That is a great neighborhood. It doesn't feel like urban crowding. It feels like small, manageable houses of this kind. And not all of them are tiny, but on a 1/10 of an acre, you would have one that would be tiny because you've got to fit to scale. So, again, I'm dancing around it because I feel like if I confront these sort of biases head on, that just creates harder resistance.
Did you retain
so maybe
the
there's something I'm missing
requirement?
here.
Did you retain the 2 acre? Is there still a 2 acre requirement?
Nowhere.
No?
Nowhere is there a 2 acre
one?
requirement.
Did we ever have one? Okay.
Yes, up until Monday.
Well, the kicker there is that you end up with, when you have you've got lots of property that's buildable, but it's landlocked because you have frontage requirements, right? And you have access issues. You look at Thompson and there's a lot of open space. Well, the reality is that you can't build it because you need a 600-foot driveway to get there. So that's
we just had a preliminary discussion with someone. I believe it was Thompson Road, right, Tara?
Yeah.
Who basically 50 acres, a lot of it's landlocked, but we were sitting there discussing how he could possibly take that and subdivide it and then put a private driveway and then have a housing association. So say he could get 8 houses in there. So they would have a housing association that would take care of that long driveway that would go into the houses that have the 150-foot frontage, which is what's still required. So and he's going to be coming back with a preliminary proposal to bring to the Planning and Zoning Commission. So that's one way that you can develop some of these acreage that do not have the frontage. He has enough of the frontage to drive into there.
Yeah, and it was an interesting test case
Yes.
that just happened to land in our laps, because the guy does have, as she said, I think it's 52
50 acres. 50,
and
yeah.
his house is way, way back, and the topography, up in the northeast corner is its high point, and then it just sort of slopes down toward Thompson Road, and he doesn't want to lose his vistas any more than anybody else does. So he's probably going to have half to 2/3 of his property still untouched, but because we've enabled these more flexible construction requirements, he can monetize that front piece of his property via subdivision without having to cut the whole thing up. So at least in an early test case, it kind of works.
And the other asset on that piece of property was that he could take a portion of those acreage and deed it to the homeowners for the group use, for everyone to use that for open space.
Sure.
Whatever they wanted to develop, do back there in that property. One other thing, when I was reading this before I came into the meeting, is on your housing data profile sheet, and you look down at the bottom, and it says by 2030, you're going to have a tremendous increase in the ages from 55 all the way up to 79. And so when you're talking about downsizing, maybe some emphasis should be put into the plan, because that is a 10-year period of looking to develop affordable housing for downsizing, for that population to downsize to. Somehow incorporate that in there.
Yeah, so that brings us to the next point, which is what is the action plan, which I didn't have time to develop even rudimentary bullet points.
Okay.
So affordable housing for downsizers, and that's been mentioned here a couple of times.
Yeah, based it on the population projections of that chart, 2018 chart, housing data profiles.
Yeah.
Oh, I know the word I was looking for was that development, open space. Sorry. Getting back to that development we would talk about on Thompson Road, they would leave.
Yeah, the conservation subdivision.
Yes. Give over so much acreage in the deed for open space for the residents of that subdivision.
Seems like I'm looking at some properties here. One's owned by, it's at off of Spicer Road, and there's like multiple lots. They've got a cul-de-sac planned and no construction. Maybe we're on the horns of a dilemma. Nobody wants too much density. If we do have density, we want high quality density, and there may be no simple answer to it. No easy one. It's you want single family dwellings. Well, you want small, large, high valued homes that generate a lot of cash tax revenue. On the other side, if you want density, you want high quality, condos, townhouses, or something which I don't have to mow. People don't have to mow, and then you can look at the age cutoffs, whether it's 55, 62. There's all different categories in there, restrictions, but we have to deal with what we have today and plan for the future. And maybe that's what this plan is about. How do we get there? And we've got a lot of resources available, and maybe it's just a matter of the demand catching up with us. And you've got a lot of folks leaving major metros these days because they have remote or rural areas, or the rural urban overlap, or there's a bunch of terms for it. Have the capability now the way that you could have your fairly good compensation from a downtown kind of position, but you could work most of your time remote in Thompson. So how do we make that attractive? And wish I had all the easy answers to this, but I don't know if it's
some of them are definitely complicated problems, right? And some of them conflict at least slightly with one another.
Right.
Like tied into the density argument is a solvency argument. and as was addressed in the public works section, you know, with 95.97 miles of road, you know, and then you're looking at, you were looking at a level of taxation with the existing population that would either have to be outrageously high, or you don't get anything. And clearly in Thompson, they've tended to go towards that latter.
Yeah.
So a drive-in density without adding infrastructure is the sort of the simplest way to describe solution to the problem. But what does it mean without adding infrastructure? You know, again, no new roads. We don't want another new mile of road ever built if we can avoid it, and we're going to go out of our way in the subdivision regulations to try to make that the case. The roads that you have can bear more density with road frontage that exists. If we're looking at 19 houses per road mile with a potential density, even as currently zoned, of 70 parcels per road mile, we are obviously well below the capacity that the existing roads can handle, even in the outlying areas. But the most profitable, from a taxation standpoint, properties are not big houses. It's dense neighborhoods with lots of houses.
Right.
Those amortize and offset service costs way better. And in fact, there's a website that I read all the time called Strong Towns, and they yammer away at this point all the time. If you do the comparison on tax revenues from crappy looking blocks with little bodegas and, you know, tiny little businesses and shabby windows, they outperform big box stores on the same amount of real estate regularly, because the big box stores negotiate tax breaks. They never offset the amount of services that they require. You know, in the sort of shabby looking blocks, often you'll have storefronts on ground floor and apartments further up, so the services are shared. Like these are the arguments for density. So even in a sort of not aesthetically pleasing poor neighborhood, they are outperforming and subsidizing in many ways the more expensive neighborhoods with the big lots, you know, that get all bent out of shape when their roads aren't plowed and they make the demands. And so, you know, the balance that people don't understand because they respond to things, you know, with their eyes or how they feel about things is what gets lost.
Perhaps there's another approach that I don't think it's going to happen today, and maybe it can be incorporated into this plan. However, realize that everyone's working remote, and probably a good chunk of them are never going back to the office. And if they do, they're going to go back intermittently or periodically. So what percentage of businesses are actually now operating in Thompson, Connecticut that were operating in Boston or Worcester or Providence, wherever? Because their people are here, they've got high-speed internet, they were working from their homes. So they've got this question mark. So how do you monetize that? Because the cities aren't going to need the infrastructure they have. If this kind of the approach takes it where we don't have as many people working in the city, right? And does the brick and mortar footprint have to track with it? But our tax structure and our revenue structure is based on, you know, the grand list and the values of those properties. So I don't know if there's you can reconcile it today. That's one dimension. Another dimension would be how to, you know, you need to get the revenue, and that mill project is a real big important target for us, I think, because that's when it is you know, fully realized, there'll be a beacon of opportunity, and it will inspire others that are more timid and more risk averse. So then the rest will follow. It's sort of like build it and they will come. You put that there and it works, then all of a sudden you have more folks moving out here. You've got a lot of vacant lots. As I look at the site plan, I still would like to get an inventory of how many home lots are not constructed. That would give you a feeling for available building lots. So I don't know if there's a good answer.
Well,
I can tell you right now what's active on the market. There's like 7 pieces of land for sale in Thompson. 7.
It's offered for sale. But how
for
about
sale.
how about lots that are subdivided but not even being offered? They're just there. Now, I'm counting 10 that are. I'm looking at them off of Spicer Road.
So that's
1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
there's
6,
a
7, 8.
subdivision on Logan's Lane,
Yeah.
and there's a couple of lots for
Logan
sale
Lane.
there.
I'm looking at Logan Lane. Yeah, there's like several right there.
A couple of those are for sale right now, and
Okay.
there's I don't know, like 2 or 3 lots for sale on New Road, and that was that newer subdivision, and so those have finally hit the market.
Right.
So those are for sale. But there's Madison Ave, that's another new subdivision. Those are practically all sold. So there's no real subdivisions that are for sale that individuals can purchase, because it's usually owned by a builder, and he wants to build all the houses in that subdivision, which is pretty typical. I mean, that's probably what happened to Logan's Lane. I mean, that's been there for years, and I think probably the original developer, this was years ago when market changed terribly and it dropped. But right now, I got to tell you, the people that are buying the houses for sale in Thompson, in Putnam, in the Northeast Connecticut are from out of state. They're either from Rhode Island or Massachusetts, and every property that's on the market is selling for over asking price.
That's great. That reinforces the deposit that we came up with before, that people are coming here to buy homes from other places.
Yeah, but we don't have any inventory to offer them. I mean, there's like 3 houses for sale in Putnam right now. So there's just nothing for sale, because as soon as it comes on, it goes under contract with, 7, 10, 15 offers.
But that what that will do, though, is create a demand, because if people that currently hold, and they're depending on their demographic, they're going to say, hey, I bought this house in 1960, 1974, 1979, and the kids are grown. I want to go to Florida. And who do I sell my house to? And the people are coming in saying, we'll buy the new house, we'll upgrade it and do it. So I guess we don't look so narrowly at, brand new construction. We can look at, and it's, I don't know if you can even get this data point, but, there's inventory out there. And I think we talked about it earlier, saying we've got so many single families, multi-bed, what the bedrooms are and all that. But they're potential sellers, and they're just waiting for the right price point. And the current economic condition will probably help motivate those that are, thinking of leaving, to sell to those that want to move in, because they want to move out of Boston or Providence or wherever they are. But
I can also tell you that there are older individuals who want to sell their homes, but where are they going to go? If they're 60 or 65 or 70 years old and they don't want to go into elderly housing per se, they want to buy a condo or a smaller single-family home, there's no place for them to go. So they're not going to sell their houses until they find something, and there's just nothing for them to go to.
Unless the price goes up to the point, right, pushes up the price, as you suggest. It's over asking, and the listing period is, I'm not sure what the average listing rate is. Is it a week, a month? What do we have here?
Less than a week.
Wow, that tells me they're selling them too cheap. That's
So Joanne, you made a really valid point. I'm probably sitting in a home that's probably going to get 25% more than it would of maybe 2 years ago.
A year ago.
Wow.
So, but where will I go? Because I want to stay in the area. I want to continue working in Thompson. But where will I go?
That's it. That's the problem. You have no place to go. There's only one condo complex in Thompson, or you can live in the mobile homes up in Quinnebog.
Yeah, no one won't do that.
Well, engineered housing can be really good. It could be real positive. But what that will do is, if we get the word out to the developers, saying, hey, look, you know what, we have all this demand, people want to move here. Maybe this is an opportunity, but that's the market. The invisible hand will do that, because there's folks out there watching these numbers that we don't even know who they are, but I guarantee they're tracking it. They've got all the metrics. They've got very sophisticated software. They're watching it. I know that our company does this. We do it all over the country, nationwide, and they're looking at opportunities, and we sell this stuff. So there's probably a developer that's looking for the right metrics and saying, aha, Thompson, you know what? It's the nexus of New England. It's only so many minutes from each of all these places, and they've got a lot of real estate. But
So
I don't know
this
if
is
we
a
can direct
question.
that.
This is a question I have, and I don't know who it's a question for. I guess I would start with Joanne. So in talking about the creation or the enabling in the core downtown, whatever what Renee was calling the lots mostly, what used to be called R20, all this stuff that we've said, you can have these tiny little lots. A certain amount of that doesn't become activated unless there are individuals who are, willing to take on either, rehabs, conversions of larger structures into multis, duplexes, splits, adding carriage house units, whatever. But those things aren't good investments for large-scale developers. However, to some extent, I don't care about large-scale developers. I care about building community wealth, right? So are you familiar with any programs to help small, first-time, like dip the toe in, I don't want to call them land speculators, but, I want to build a duplex. I want to buy an old fixer-upper. Are you aware of any programs that we could tap into for locals who want to, build individual wealth in the community by being landlords or small-scale developers?
Well, as soon as a multifamily comes on the market, I listed a two-family in Putnam a week ago, and I had 10 showings the very next day, and it sold. Now, that was a multifamily. Years ago, multifamilies lasted forever on the market. This was a two-family. It sold to somebody from Worcester who paid over asking price and can't wait to come in to live in Putnam. So there are programs out there. There's like 203K programs where you can buy a house that needs some work, and you can get the additional funding through the government. 203K is what.
Yeah, we have a 203K loan on this house.
Okay.
I mean, I'm thinking more of like education programs for people who want to do it.
If there's a cheap house for sale, Tara, it's not going to go. It can be sold to the first-time home buyer, because now that some of these places, when they list the property, it's for 7 to 10 days. It has to be sold to a first-time home buyer, not a flipper. So
interesting.
They do
okay.
that.
And what is it that creates that stipulation?
Well, you have to, when you close on the deal, you have to tell them you're going to live there for 2 years.
Right, but what designates the property as being locked out for first-time home buyers? How does?
If a property comes on the market and it's $80,000, $90,000, and it needs a ton of work, it'll be stipulated. These are specifically HUD properties owned by the government, so they're not privately owned properties. They're all HUD properties, and they were trashed or whatever. And by the time HUD gets them, puts them on the market, they want to sell them to first-time home buyers. So
gotcha.
that's usually the first 10 or 15 days of the listing is only open to owner occupants, and after that, then it can go to a flipper. But I got to tell you, it'll definitely go to the owner occupant.
Well, that's encouraging, actually.
Yeah, it is.
So in this action plan, I've scribbled down a few things, but I don't think it's comprehensive. Come up with an affordable housing strategy for developments for downsizers of some kind.
Yeah.
An affordable housing plan in general, and that's kind of a foregone, because I do have that grant that I received. I'm just waiting for DOH to publish their updated guidelines, and then I'm going out to RFP on that. So that's something that will happen, a general town-wide affordable housing plan prepared with a consultant. So I'm going to move that to the top. Incentives for home rehab, which Cindy brought up. I know that we just adopted that revitalization district to map to the downtown mill district. And that does provide some kind of tax incentive for either construction of or rehab of multifamily properties specifically. I need to find out how that gets triggered. Explore the possibility of creating a neighborhood revitalization zone, which would probably be very close to that same footprint. Maybe one cancels the other out, but I'm going to look into that. That was a program that Hoween Flexer was talking about to me back when I was just a volunteer on EDC. And, you know, at the time I just had another job. I couldn't really look into it at all in terms of, you know, what it takes to form one. But I believe that is still an active program. And then programs, I mean, I just, based on this last round of conversation, scribbled down, you know, programs to educate first-time home buyers, owner-occupant developers of multis. I think there's something in there, although I don't know what exactly it is. Anybody else? What am I missing here? What do we want to do?
We talked a little bit about the subdivisions. I don't know if you want to continue exploring that.
Yeah, find out what. Yeah.
I mean, there is a list in my desk of subdivisions that I inherited, but I've never really looked at it due to lack of time.
Yeah, that would be great to look at.
Yeah. Actually, yeah, I'll have to pull it out. And I'm going to be very honest, I have not updated in 3 years I've been here, but then there hasn't been that many subdivisions in 3 years I've been here either. So.
Nothing's been happening. I mean, the building wasn't even going on 3 years ago. Now suddenly it's going on.
You have the Donovan Street subdivision too.
Oh, yep. And that sold maybe 3 years ago, or 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, he's busy. You know, Jason's busy out there.
But Donovan Drive is like the one that Meehan's doing. Those are, the developer owns it. They're building individual homes to a set of plans and selling.
Right.
So the suggestion that I think George was making was, you know, figure out where the subdivided land is that is not in development in the same way.
Right.
That would be quite
to find out what the potential is.
Yeah. How about, like, for example, there's one right behind the center of town. Right off, it's currently listed as the name of ownership is Northeast Sand and Gravel.
Well, no, that subdivision was canceled out because they reached their expiration on it, so we canceled the subdivision.
Well,
so
I know. What I'm getting at is, though, if you look behind the school, between there and Buckley Hill Road, there's a ton of real estate, and that's proximate to the town center. It's not developed today, but it's vacant or it's unoccupied, and it's, you know, if it's been used for mining, what they do is they, you know, go in later and they feed it over. But I grew up in Rhode Island, and I'll tell you, we've had tons of places that I said, oh, what a gravel pit. And well, you know, 10 years later, it's it's full of homes. It's really interesting how that works. So, you know, the question is, it's in the fullness of time, would that become something? Will someone else come along and say, look, we're going to put, you know, $20 million into this, we're going to turn it into condos or something? It's,
well, that's the selling point that all of the gravelers use, is that once they've extracted all of the saleable material, then the land becomes saleable on its own. You know, how quickly they turn around, I think, depends on the property. Cindy, what is just to use the example of Northeast Sand and Gravel, you know, what is their projection for how long they're going to be graveling up there? Do you know off the top of your head? Did we lose Cindy again?
I'm looking at the plots, the tax parcels that are in that area, and there's just a lot of real estate sitting back there it has a use today, and it's used by somebody, but, you know, in the fullness of time, what will it be? And maybe it's not going to happen today, but it's proximate to the town center. I guess we have to define what constitutes the town center, but when your mill goes in, the demand goes up, the more people want to be here. All of a sudden, folks would say that a 20-minute commute to Worcester or a 30-minute commute to Providence isn't terrible. Then that becomes a play. So how do we write this document to put, you know, allude to the possibilities of what may be? We know what is today, but what can it become? You know, that's what I'm thinking. So
Right, and that is a place where, and I was saying this to Renee the other day, where I often struggle. I can describe what is and what was with, great accuracy. What will be, of course, is the open question. I just had so, and a point I was going to raise, because I know that there are subdividable plots in what we would consider the downtown area, so let's just call it North Grosvenor, Dale in general. And a part of those biases that I was talking about before that I'm trying to disarm in some of this text and some of the things that we're otherwise trying to do, if you look back at some minutes in planning and zoning meetings for a couple of guys who wanted to develop multis up there, they're brutal. They're absolutely brutal. And the bias against multis, the bias against renters is prevalent throughout.
It's perception, that's all. I mean, it's what the people that are complaining about it are the older generation, and they're thinking in their head of what it would look like the projects in Putnam, whereas a new developer would take on a whole different new contemporary approach to multifamily or village neighborhood.
Yeah, well, I mean, I agree. Obviously, we're all the people who are thinking about it in sort of more rational terms. But, how do you get beyond that? Joe Iamartino, do you have anything you want to toss in here? You've been quiet for a while. I'm thinking of action items.
This is not my area of expertise, but I find the discussion interesting.
Well, that's okay, Joe. I have no area of expertise. I talk anyway.
But there's so many opportunities. I'll tell you what, when I came to this town, I bought this property, it's 30 acres. People said, you can't build there. I said, why not? It says, well, it's ledge and there's a dam. I said, really? So I hired an attorney and an engineer and said, find out what the limitations are on the access to the property. And engineer, tell me, is that ledge or not? Well, no, it wasn't ledge, it was glacial rubble, and the dam was a non-event because it's not impacting life safety anywhere. Okay, fine. So I can buy it for $2,000 or $3,000 an acre and build a house. And it's 45 minutes from Providence, an hour and a half from Boston or less, 30 minutes to Worcester, and it's 2.5 hours to Wall Street. And I have high-speed internet, and I have an idyllic location. But that's what we've got, all this prospect here. I guess the key thing for us is to say, if for folks that are reading this, they're going to say, you know what, there's all this opportunity, and let's not let our current vision limit our potential. Let's not let our current view limit our vision, right? That's what I'm suggesting. And I'm looking at the plot maps of Thompson. I see a lot of empty squares. I'm not suggesting we have to fill them all up, but if we do it in a rational way, or allow, more or less, we need to lay the foundation so that a rational developer, the market will do it for us. We won't be able to divine the market. We won't be able to envision necessarily the future, but we need to be open to the opportunity and, reasonable stewards of the charge to say, look, you have to have a plan that makes sense, that promises the opportunity, or at least leaves the option open. And you don't have to open things up and go crazy with it, but you can say, look, this is considered if you meet the following criteria. And maybe that will happen. And on the other side, maybe it won't. If it doesn't, then it may happen in the future at some point. This town's been around for like, what, a couple hundred years. It's another 20. It's nothing. It's a drop in the bucket. But we don't want to go too far in one direction to force something that will ultimately take on its own pace. You've got two rivers. You've got the French River and the Quinnebog River. They have their own challenges.
Three. Don't short us a river. Joe Iamartino will jump right on you.
Well, I'm telling you, how many towns would have a river running through the middle of them? Now, the downside of that, of course, is that the river is created by the North Grosvenor Pond, which is, there's a dam there, and that has its own set of challenges. So, there's a lot of constraints here, but I just find a way to make it happen. I always, the people that work with me and work for me, I go, you know what? If I wanted people to tell me how not to do something, they're all over the place. Tell me what you have and how you might achieve it. Or give me a plan, give me a proposal that says, this is how I think we can get there. And if you need my approval to do it, then I'm here for you. If you have the authority to do it yourself, then do it. That's what I paid you for. So that's sort of like the charge we have, right? We've got 8 or 10 people that are trying to make it work. We've got this document. Let's make it opening and welcoming, and give the opportunity for those to do something with it. And we may not have the solution, but there is a solution out there. Just like the mill project has a possibility. It's not there yet, but it's working it. And once it's developed, it could be, it sort of has a compound effect, a multiplier, right? It keeps going. Anyway, so much for my soapbox speech here.
Well, your soapbox is good, George, and that's what happens when people walk into the zoning office. And I said, what is it that you need? What can we do to make it work for you and stay within the regulations, or what do we have to do to help you get what you want? And I like that philosophy. I think your philosophy is good. I use that in the office. So
we'll get there.
I'll amuse you, Cindy. Daniel Blanchette called me today. Fran Napick went over to talk to him after he talked to you, me, and Carolyn yesterday. And Daniel said that he just kept saying, I couldn't believe how accommodating they were and how nice they were. So, it was, Daniel and I had a good chuckle over that.
And
so,
that's what
your goal is working. Our goal is, at least in that sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think I've got enough to draft a follow-up tomorrow, and we've got a little time. Does anybody want to revisit anything from the prior sections? Did anybody have any additional comments for me to include here? Because I'm editing as I go, all of it, all the time. I read this thing probably at least once a day in full to see what can be improved.
I can verify for that. She says that computer with their fingers going all day.
Every time you look at it, think aspirational. How can we make this easier? I'm clicking one plot after another. I'm looking at one plot that's right off of Pompeo Road. It's 73 acres. It looks like it has 2 access points, and it's vacant. It's just sitting there. It could be all sorts of things, right? It's close to the town. Idyllic location overlooking North Grosvenor Pond. But, it's the owner probably, the valuation, they showed a total value of $12,000. I'm like, wow. What the deal is, but for the right engineering, I've seen places that were piles of rock and they were all of a sudden, now they're retail malls because the price point was right, the location drove the demand, and the rock can be removed with the right carbide drill and enough pickup dump trucks. So it's out there. So we're on the right track. I don't know if we have all the solutions. I guess we need to have the right attitude, and when we write something, remember it's going to be around for a decade. So when we look at it 10 years from now, and I'm going to be here for another 30 or 40. So we're going to look at it and say, what were we on the right track? Did we leave enough opportunity? I always tell the guys and gals that work with me that are in, pitch deals, when you go into a pitch a deal and they go, oh, sorry, we don't want it. I said, don't slam the door in their face. Leave it open. Remember that, next there's another deal around the corner, and they may be the ones on the transaction, and you need to leave they have to know that you tried and you're willing to negotiate. That's where these commissions and these, approvals and stuff come in. Okay, we've got rules and guidelines that if we close our eyes, it should at least keep us from going, too far in any direction. But when we take a hard look at the developer, we take a hard look at the impact it will have, then we should have at least the flexibility to do something rather than create rules and regulations, which are, another hurdle to overcome. Anyway.
Right.
Well, Terry,
so anybody, anything on the prior sections? I'm all ears, guys.
No, you need to go take a nap, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Actually, Joe and I need to have another call right after this so that we can both go take a nap.
We have to give you a raise. We should put you in for a raise, like, 20% or something.
Yeah. Why don't you go pitch that to our first selectman and see how that statement goes?
It doesn't. I have no problem doing that. Let me tell you, the deals I deal with. I'm telling you, I'll take on Amy any day. So yeah, no, but really, I think it's a plus. So I think you're on the right track. Keep up the good work.
Yep. Okay. Sounds good.
Okay, so
Good.
we're going to have a full working group meeting on Monday for everybody who can make it, and we'll go back and see what, and it maybe will be short because everything will have been touched, so this will just be refining sections 1 through 7 based on the work we've already done. And then next Wednesday is the economic development section. Who's on that? Let me see, probably. Yeah, I know Joanne.
Yeah, Brian. Hey, just don't open the floor to questions and comments from people so we can, that'll make it go a lot quicker, right?
Can we do something to make the town like, you know, a class 9 out of 10 education system? I mean, that'd be a real plus.
Well, wouldn't we all love that? Let me see, who's on next Wednesday? Joanne, Charlene, Leslie, George, Charlie, Joe Perotti, and me. So if you are not one of those people, you are not obliged to dial in on Wednesday the 23rd, but I am hoping everybody will dial in on the 21st. I'll send a Zoom link tomorrow when I send the update for this. And Joey and Martino, I'm going to get right off this call and call you.
Okay.
All
Good
set.
night, everybody.
Thanks a lot. Have a good night.
Good night, everyone.
Bye now.
Take care.
Bye.